Hi, this is Tim Martin, and this is an overview of my Synergon case analysis. So I'll just kind of give a brief overview of my case analysis paper and give some of the more critical and key points to the problem, the diagnosis, and the action plan. So really quickly to overview the case, what we have is an acquisition or a merger between Synergon and Beaumont, and these are contrasting cultures. Synergon is a very ruthless culture, very strong ruthless culture, and Beaumont is characterized by more of a relational culture, especially with regard to its client relationships. Whereas Synergon's client relationships, or the companies that they acquire, they typically go in and gut the operation. This is new grounds for Synergon, as it is a strategic acquisition as opposed to what their standard procedure is, which is to buy underperforming companies, gut them, and make them profitable, and essentially fire the whole staff and start from the ground up. This is a highly complex situation with many troubling circumstances currently, and so as such, it's a very fluid situation. And quite honestly, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with this merger and the integration of Beaumont into Synergon's operations. So the current state of the integration between these two cultures and companies is that it is really on the precipice of failure. We've got culture clashes. The ruthless culture of Synergon has met the relational culture of Beaumont, and we're seeing a lot of employees who are very unhappy with it, and leadership's very unhappy with it at Beaumont. There's been a poor rollout of the plan, and this has been characterized by poor communication, and what we have is overall turbulent interactions between the companies. Beaumont has expressed that they feel as though the operations have been paralyzed by the processes and procedures that Synergon has imposed upon Beaumont. Now, the desired future state is this thing we call synergy, which I think the picture on the right illustrates this very well. 1 + 1 is greater than 2. So in this case, the desired state is that Synergon would gain synergies from its relationship with Beaumont, that there would be synergistic operations, and this would be characterized by operational efficiencies, utilization of Synergon's different resources, and then Synergon tapping into Beaumont's culture, their customer list. And two critical parts of this desired future state are A, a retention of competitive advantage for Beaumont, and B, the retention of the key Beaumont employees. So the problem in this case is that without a change in Synergon's approach, what we're going to see is that Julian Mansfield is going to leave. Essentially, once Julian Mansfield, the key employee of Beaumont, leaves, the company is going to crumble if they're not prepared for his exit. We'll see core competencies of Beaumont eroded, profitability will decline, there'll be a loss on the acquisition for Synergon, and a likely loss of customers that Beaumont has previously enjoyed. Some of the key driving forces in this is, first, Julian Mansfield is bought into the integration between the companies. He's expressed a desire to work together with Synergon in order to create the synergistic relationship, and his cooperation is pivotal in the success of this at this particular moment. Synergon has vast resources. Nick Cunningham is prepared mentally for this. He's the only one at Synergon who has been prepared mentally for this type of situation, so he's uniquely qualified, or at least he has a leg up in this situation to kind of lead this process. And then Synergon's leadership was in alignment with generally the desired state and the idea that Beaumont would be left alone in its operations. So even though Synergon has imposed a whole bunch of new processes and procedures, the leadership back at the home office of Synergon is in alignment with this idea of not really tampering with Beaumont's operations. The restraining forces, there's a couple critical ones here. There's a lack of expertise from Synergon in their ability to integrate a strategically acquired company, a company that is strong in its operations. They've never done this before. This would be the first round for the company. Next is that J.J. Diamato, who has been the proponent of this acquisition, has got a very prideful and dismissive approach to taking criticism and guidance from anybody who may be a subordinate to him. So that would kind of jeopardize his relationship with Nick Cunningham if Nick is going to come and bring any sort of suggestions on what to do. And we've got a culture clash between the companies. The norms of each company are completely different. Synergon is very ruthless, as I've stated, and Beaumont is very relational. So this is something that's going to be difficult for these companies to kind of come together and work through. And then we got a likely exit of Julian Mansfield in the midterm and maybe even the short term. And like I said, he's critical to the operation. And as such, if he were to leave early, what we'd see is that the viability of this integration would be greatly jeopardized because nobody else really knows how to run the operations. So the diagnosis, what's going on in this case? Problem is a result of inexperience. Beaumont or Synergon does not have the experience in this type of acquisition. They've failed to adapt their approach. They are using the same approach that they use for value acquisitions as opposed to this being a strategic acquisition. And so they're kind of using a one-size-fits-all for it. They got incompatible processes and procedures as a result of the incompatible approach. There's a lack of understanding of Beaumont's operations. Synergon really hasn't done the research on the company in order to really understand the value prop and what Beaumont brings to the table. And then we've got inaccurate communication between the companies. So this has been characterized, for example, by Synergon really expressing that Beaumont would be left alone in its operations and then finding out that that's not really true based on what's been happening. Proof of the diagnosis. So the inexperience, I think this is pretty much a given. This is the first acquisition of the kind for the company, and so they just don't have the processes and procedures to effectively handle this acquisition and the integration of the companies. They've had a failure to adapt their approach. They're using this one-size-fits-all, and this has been characterized by the same kind of approach they used for a value acquisition, which is essentially to gut the operation, cut all the fat off the operation, and then try to boost profits in the short term. But what this is doing is creating incompatible processes. So they're essentially they're either overtly or potentially damaging the value added operations of Beaumont. And one of the examples we see with these incompatible processes is how they're treating customers. So Synergon implemented a very stringent requirement for customers in their contracting phase and the payment phase. And as a result, what we've seen is that even one of the major contracts that was coming up actually did not go through because of the lack of the relational approach in the contracting phase. There's a lack of understanding of Beaumont, and this has been characterized by very little research that's been done on the company itself. It's just a great example of this is the approach to bring a very rigid contracting protocol for Beaumont that's actually damaged customer relationships. This shows that there's just a lack of understanding of how Beaumont's even doing what it's doing and how it's retaining competitive advantage. Another example would be how they cut bonuses. Now, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the bonuses could use a little cutting, but in this case, they didn't do the research and they don't actually have the adequate knowledge in order to kind of detach the bonuses from performance. So these bonuses could very well be a key driver of performance. And there's been some inaccurate communication here. So Beaumont was told they're going to be left alone, and Synergon is clearly not doing that. They came in, they implemented new processes and procedures that Beaumont was not expecting. And Mansfield actually expressed this in the meeting with Nick Cunningham. He was kind of flabbergasted at the whole process and how it had played out and how he had understood that they weren't going to touch the operations. So the action plan, like I said, this is a pretty complex situation. A lot has to fall into place for it to go well. It can go well, and it's important to follow this outlined action plan in its entirety if the desired state is to be achieved. So the first step, and as a result of D'Amato's kind of prideful approach to the situation, is that we need to bring an urgency to the situation to D'Amato himself. So Cunningham really needs to outline the financial impacts of what could happen if this integration fails, if Mansfield exits, and really try to make that connection between JJ D'Amato's his performance at Synergon with the performance of this merger and integration. Then we need to see a retraction of the recently implemented processes. Simply put, there are too many practice processes and procedures that have been put into place without the necessary research. So really, we don't know what these processes are doing. We don't know if they are paralyzing the company. We don't know if they're hurting the company's competitive advantage. It's pretty clear that the customer protocol that they implemented has hurt the competitive advantage of Beaumont. And what we need to do with this is rebuild trust and do some damage control for what's actually been rolled out and how it's been perceived by the company. Number 3, we need to create a case for hiring outside support. Really, Beaumont or Synergon doesn't have the expertise in-house for this, and they need some help in order to kind of navigate a situation that they've never seen before. So this is going to be critical, and getting D'Amato on board with this is also going to be critical. Next step, and assuming that we can get D'Amato on board and the Synergon leadership on board, there needs to be diligence and a contracting phase for the outside support. So Synergon needs to find the right partner, the one that's going to be able to really mesh with them and help them achieve that desired state, somebody with a unique understanding of that. And they really need to do diligence in this process to find that correct partner, because if they do not get the right partner in this whole thing could blow up just from doing incorrect steps. Step 5 is succession planning. Mansfield is going to leave. That is a given. And whether he leaves in the midterm or the short term, we need to eliminate this barrier and create the chance for long-term success. So when Mansfield leaves, there needs to be something in place, or a leadership structure in place that can kind of carry the baton after he's gone. So succession planning is key, and we need to bring Mansfield in on that succession planning as soon as possible. Next, documentation of processes. All the way through this is a new process for Synergon. They need to document the whole thing so that they can replicate this in the future. Number 7, and this is after we've retracted the different processes and procedures that have been added, and also something I forgot to mention with that is that the company needs to. This would be back. Let's go back a slide here. For number 2, the retraction of the implemented processes and responsibility taken. So they need to take responsibility for this and try to build trust. They need to essentially go to the company and try to rebuild this idea that they're actually there to create synergies and not just destroy the company. So where were we? The research team. This research team, it should be a composition of both Beaumont key employees and Synergon employees, and the outcome of this is to learn about Beaumont's operations, learn about the value-added process, the value proposition, their core competencies, their competitive advantage, what makes them successful, in order to really devise later on some processes and procedures that are going to be congruent with the end state. Next is an integration team, and the idea of this is to bring a collaborative solutions based on the research for how to integrate the companies successfully and create those synergies without jeopardizing the desired state. So another critical part about the desired state, which I failed to mention, is that we really want Beaumont to adapt the growth culture of Synergon, because that's the idea. They need to be growing, and so these solutions should have the balance between helping create that growth culture and also retaining the competitive advantage of Beaumont. Number 9, development of processes and procedures to meet the desired state. We want to see mutual development of these. And then the rollout, number 10, rollout and implementation of this. We need clear communication plan, over-communicate, awareness of what's going on so that the employees don't feel like they're having the rug pulled out from them. They need to implement the processes, roll them out, and then reinforce this new state that they're trying to implement. So this would be positive reinforcement of actions that are congruent with it, and then also negative consequences for people that maybe don't follow this or don't adopt the new processes. And then 11, this is kind of an ongoing thing, would be continued research and feedback of the state as it's rolled out. So continuing to research what's going on, gain feedback from employees, course correct if needed, and manage really the complex nature of this integration. This action plan, again, a lot of this can change because the situation is A, very fluid, B, very turbulent, and C, highly risky at this point. Some of the risks that we're going to need to overcome. First is Diamato's resistance. I think this is pretty much a given. He appears to be very prideful, and I think it's going to be very important to kind of diffuse this by overemphasizing the impending failure of this integration. Show him what's going on with Mansfield probably on the verge of leaving before there's even a succession plan in place, and then what? And kind of can make that connection between Diamato's success at Synergon and the overall success of this project. Next, we got a short timeline on this. This could blow up any minute, so it's going to be very important to allocate enough resources and human resources and monetary resources to find the appropriate partner to do this with, and then get these teams in place as quickly as possible. Then we've got resistance to the course correction. There could, from the Synergon leadership, there could be leaders that are not on board with this. So again, we need to bring urgency to the situation, show the impending failure of this, and leverage a lot of these likely scenarios that could damage the integration. Next, we've got the quick exit of Mansfield. So this is critical, and this is why we've got the succession plan as part of the action plan, because if he leaves, this thing blows up. So in order to keep him there long enough to complete the succession plan, there's two things that we need. We need first off a timeline for when this needs to be completed, and then we need to monetarily compensate him for completing this. Give him a very generous compensation plan for the successful completion and successful kind of raising up of new leaders in the company. Then we've also got a culture clash and unwillingness of the companies to work together. This could potentially happen, so I think the really important way to fix this, or to at least mitigate the results, or to educate the people at Synergon, the employees who are working with Beaumont, of the actual operations of the company, so that they understand what's going on and that they're going to be sensitive to the culture rather than just imposing their own culture on it. Training the employees, monetary incentives for actions that are congruent with the desired state, and even firings. If people aren't on board with this, there has to be some firings for that. And there could be a rejection of the future change by Beaumont employees. We're going to see a retraction of the old processes and procedures, which could create a sign of kind of weakness for the Beaumont employees, how they view the Synergon employees and then the Synergon plan. And so it's important to show in this case, so that they know that Synergon's serious about this: clear deadlines, clear timelines, rewarding that positive behavior, eliminating negative behavior, and follow through. So in conclusion, again, highly complex situation, very volatile, could blow up. There is undoubtedly a need for potential course correction even through the action plan, because it's so turbulent at this time. But if this action plan in its totality is successfully achieved, I think what we're going to see is an increased chance of a successful integration, reduced probability of failure. They'll retain Beaumont's core competencies, but also build on these synergistic relationships that companies need. We'll see the growth that Synergon's really looking for. There'll be long-term success as opposed to just short-term by keeping Mansfield around. And really, there'll be a clear motivation for Beaumont employees to adopt the growth culture, because we'll have reinforcement in place for them, monetary compensation and consequences for actions that are either congruent with or detracting from the desired end state. And I think what we're going to see is that the companies will be able to come together through this action plan. So that's the overview of my paper, and just wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen.